Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of Railroads, Culture and Communication, Virginia McKendry, and Joshua, Dr. Geiler, you're here. Yeah, on behalf of Dr. Geiler and everyone, we want to do a welcome to Railroads University. Chitamista. You don't need to remember that, but that's what our people call us, Chitamista. And the Coast Salish territory, you're in Coast Salish territory. So I think you might be aware of that. If not, that's a little bit of homework for you. So anyway, welcome. We welcome you to Railroads University on behalf of the president, faculty, staff, and culture and communication. My name is Greg Sam, and I'm from the Salish community. And we have Bill White, who sits on our advisory committee and is working with the Watle program, which is now what we're doing, the Watle. And I think you'll have some written information on that. So welcome to Railroads University. We'd like to also welcome our speaker, Dave Bodaly. Lachia is his Indian name. But Virginia will give you a little bit more detail as to Dave Bodaly and where he's from. I think he has a correct pronunciation of names and such like that. We want to do a song for you. It's called a victory song. Catherine, can we do that for you? Good, Haichka. Haichka in our language is thank you. You say that for me. Haichka. 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 Good, that's a thank you. So anyway, I've asked my cousin, Bill White, to come and stand with me to do this victory song. And also for welcome to you and our elders. Kamkimala. I'm trying to think, you'll have to forgive me. Oh, ganche, need na asa. Ganche. Sino utlamnuk, need na papers. Spastana. So we welcome our elders from Beecher Bay, close by. And some of the other faculty and staff. And Linda Bristol just came in from Souk. Linda Bristol. Hi, Linda. One of the elders from Souk Nation. Bert Charles and Lavina Charles are from Beecher Bay, of course. So anyway, can we? Yes.
The reason he's whispering to me is because a few years ago we were singing with a group of us, and my good relative, my cousin Greg, claims that I started to sing an entirely different song.
He did.
And our old people, Salish people, they're really, they're not supposed to question. And I said to my cousin and his wife on that, because his mouth dropped. And he stood right in front of me, staring. Our people don't stare either. So I said, Greg, how come you just didn't start singing along? I said, all the white people knew there was something wrong. That's what that chat is. Okay, go ahead.
This is a prayer song. Prayer song. Oh, son, good flee.
that, I guess, what do we call it, medicine for you to see, to hear, to understand, to wear good feelings all the time. You have good feelings all the time. Bochiano, as the older people say, to a smile. Can we have a smile from you? Good, thank you. So anyway, yeah, it's a medicine now for how you see it, your perception, feeling. Maybe, like we say, maybe there's one or two of you that might not be feeling 100%. That's to give you that energy. You send off wherever that is, but you might be packing. Send that off, maybe for your family. Oh, and my cousin, Kayleeman, Cosley, he's got two names, Kayleeman Cosley. He wants to sing a victory song now, so we're going to sing that for you. He's sing a victory song. It's a celebration song, a fun song, a medicine song, energy song. A lot of people say, well, it's not a lot. Some people say it almost makes you want to dance. Yeah. So move to the song if you like. Oh, 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 Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Bill. And thank you all for making your way over here. We got some of the staffs here and our visitors from Holland. Thank you very much for making your way down here. Catherine, thank you very much for bringing them here. And Virginia, now can I hand it over to you, Virginia?
You certainly may. Thank you, Greg.
Thank you.
Lachlachalach. This is really his non-borrowed name. So thank you for coming, everybody, today. What a wonderful turnout. We're packed. We have a packed room, and I'm so delighted because it's a really good day for you to be here. We've been running the Watle series, speaker series, for 1 year now. We've had, our first year was primarily inviting our elders to come and set the foundation for what is really a cross-cultural, cultural inquiry initiative, which is partly speaker series, and we're starting to now see all sorts of little research projects and other initiatives starting to grow around it. I've given everybody, I'm taking advantage today, and I've put a little feedback form in front of everyone's chair, and I wonder if you could just fill it out for me. If you don't want to put your name and email on there, that's fine, but if you'd like to actually keep, be on our distribution list for these events, we can send you a notice telling you that we're going to be having this, and we post these presentations every month up onto our website, so you'll be apprised that they're available and you can view them. So I'd love to know what you think about today once we've been through this, and please, if you just leave your feedback forms on the table, I can collect them afterwards. And if anybody would be interested in doing some participant action research with me, in about a month's time. Just note that too at the bottom of your feedback form. And we can do that together here in Victoria, but we can also do it using all of our online tools. And it'd be really lovely to have some cross-institutional collaboration. I know my students in the BA in Professional Communication program would really love to meet some students from Holland. University of Groningen, is this? Yes, well welcome, and welcome to Canada and Railroads and Victoria. Today I'm very pleased to welcome Mr. Dave Bodaly. He is from Snuneymuxw First Nation, which is the original name for Nanaimo, which is up island. And he has worked as a photographer and a genealogist for many First Nations for several years, decades I believe, on Vancouver Island. He's worked a lot down here in this area at Songhees First Nation and lived there for many years. And now he's residing back in his ancestral land up island. He's very kindly offered to come and share all of his knowledge about, and images too. I'm going to be the image person walking around showing you some of his photographs while he's talking about them. And these are images that evoke the histories and the territories and the hereditary names and the place names that actually are central to the identity of what it means to be a Coast Salish person and a people. So without further, is there anything else you'd like me to add, Dave? And I'm sure you can embroider what I've said, but please join me in welcoming Dave Bodaly.
Thank you. Thank you for that kind introduction. I don't get those introductions as often in the First Nations community. As you were saying, my name is Dave Bodaly. I come from a little town on the west coast of Vancouver Island called Port Alberni. And I haven't always been First Nations. My ancestral family is from Nanaimo, but my last name is English. Oxford, England, the Bodleian Library, it's knowledge of that is where my ancestry comes from, my father's lineage. But I moved home in 1994. I'll jump ahead to that part because that's where I really started to learn about the history and the community members, how I'm related. My mother comes from the reserve of Nanaimo, and she's one of 9 children. And unfortunately, only 9 months after I moved home, she passed away. So any of the knowledge that she shared with me in that 9 months was what I had to carry. And I've been honored because the community took me in, realizing who I am and what family I come from. So I started working to trace my own history in the community and find out who I'm related to. And in the Coast Salish, it's very important to know where we come from in order to know where we're going. And it's been one of my phrases for many years in doing this work of having the knowledge of my community and my family, and found out I'm related to half of Vancouver Island, any of the First Nations, and even some of the non-First Nations, because my father's family has a lot of connections too. But my mother's mother is Emily James Satasia from Snuneymuxw. And the lineage that she comes from is half Kwakwaka'wakw, which is in the North Kwakiutl, and half Coast Salish, because her mother was from a little island called Penelakut Island. It used to be called Cooper Island. And I presently work over at Penelakut Island, tracing the history of the youngest members of the community members from there. So I'm documenting the baby's life journey. From one of the babies was 8 days old when I took the first pictures of him. And he just grew right up from there, and it's really exciting to have documented that for the community. So, okay, now that's a little bit of the work back, but I'm going to jump back again to how I've come about to this. Because when I look back after finishing high school in the early 80s, I moved to Alberta, which was the next province over, if anyone doesn't know the area, but I lived there for 13 years. And while there, I moved and lived in the southern states for 3 months, and then moved to Central America and picked up the culture from there. So me hablo más español after being in Costa Rica. So very nice, a real honor whenever I get to meet someone who has got that language, because it comes right back again. So, and that's part of something that I find within the Coast Salish. When we learn something, we learn it once, we will do that for our life. because the Coast Salish has been a really, really interesting perspective, like I was saying, coming from an English ancestry to that, and having received my native status in 1989, became an American called a national, so I could live and work in the US also. So it gave me a good experience. And then I ended up getting married in Dallas, Texas, and adopted one daughter while I was there. But unfortunately, that didn't work out, and I came back to Canada and ended up, we separated 4 years later. But it was all part of my experience of doing along the journey of where I'm getting to now. And coming home to Vancouver Island in 1994, living in my reserve community, getting to know my community, and again, finding the family members, finding how I'm related to everybody. And continuing from there, it's been an amazing journey. I'm working on a book because of all my work of history and asked by many of the elders in the communities. I'm honored to see the elders here from Beecher Bay. I call my Sakwa Shayeth because the connections to my family are cousins, but they're of an older generation than me. And my cousin from Souk Reserve, I'm honored to see you here too. And this is really neat because in all the work I did in the south end of the island here, I worked with these communities and sat with the eldest of the community members to document their history, to record down who their ancestors were, and document photos of them, take pictures of them, of their ancestors and whatnot. So it's created for, the Souk Reserve was one of the reserves where I created an archives within the community. So the community owns this archival collection of history. The Songhees also has one I created for them, whose land, this is originally Songhees territory. Before the castle was here, this chief from Songhees has the name of Stilquimut, which is the name of the lagoon. This is where his ancestral name comes from. So prior to this ever being the Royal Roads, the communities traveled here. There was plenty of fish in the lagoon area. There was always things traveling here. And it were of the saltwater peoples. We ate anything from the salt water was how we survived. And so that's really neat. And after working in Songhees for the years I got to learn a lot of that, of the cultural foods and the traditional medicines. And that's become part of my life now, is carrying those medicines and carrying those traditions. So in many ways, I feel in a way that I have to bring a book forward. Because of carrying all this information, it becomes a burden after a while, but an honor to create something within the community, create an archives for the communities, and then leave it over to them and let them run it. So we have a date when it started, but it's up to the communities to continue that on. And so after 13 years in Victoria here, I moved back to Nanaimo. After skipping a little bit here, I came back to the island, came to Victoria for 13 years at Songhees, and then now I'm back on my land in Nanaimo. And this is where my mother's ancestors all come from. My grandfather, Abraham Johnny, was named Siip, his traditional name, and his father was named Lachea, and that's the name that I carry. I was honored in 2005 to receive the name of Lachea because of the work that I'm doing. I'm interacting with so many communities and whatnot. After not being in contact with any of the family in years, it was interesting. After divorce, of course, signing the papers, I couldn't contact them ever again. But my stepdaughter contacted me on the internet and wanted to be friends on this Facebook thing. I got onto Facebook 2 years ago, and it's just taken over. It's out of control. But nonetheless, it's been interesting because it allowed her and I to be in contact. And she's a grown adult now, and she has 3 children of her own. And so by her and I communicating, she shared a lot of things with me that she couldn't share as a child because of what situation was. Nonetheless, I tried to share some of her with some of my history, of what I'm doing and whatnot. So now continuing to the communities here within Songhees, we traveled to the little islands east of Songhees here, the Chatham and Discovery Island. We did a lot of traditional medicine and work on the island, so got to really know the cultural leaders in the community, and that was a real honor to learn that, but also carry that myself. And now I'm bringing that back to my land in Nanaimo, where I'm trying to teach the community. But of course, they've already got what they've had set up for their whole life, and I've also come in. They're not willing to take on to this very easily. It seems to be, it's a challenge, it really is. But I'm having fun in what I'm doing because of working within the community is what I want to do. I want to be at home. And this is where my home is. I'm sharing with my cousin Bill that the petroglyph park in Nanaimo was built by our ancestors. And to hear that my ancestors built it 4,000 years ago was a real honor. I'm true Snuneymuxw, and I'm honored to have that connection to that community there. While working at the treaty organization where I set up these archives in the South End, I also set one up in the Noose, an organization I work for called Tomach Treaty Association. We had gone into the communities, and I worked with the community members and created this archive, and we created one for the area of Nanoose, and I've been in contact with them a few times since, and that's been really neat to see how things are progressing in there, and the new generations, because the young ones, I think one of the young girls approached me last week, and she was 7 when I was in class. She's 19 now, so it's been quite a few years ago, but it was just interesting to see that in the community. So. I'm just skipping ahead. I'm seeing so many things, and I've got my highlights of what things to talk about. I didn't want to talk about everything. I got so much here. Yes. I also have done a lot of work in the areas of the Kwakwaka'wakw people, the potlatching, because of being a photographer and a videographer, I'm traveling within their communities to meet their community members, but also my ancestors come from there also, so they've asked me to do some recording of their potlatch, and I've recorded 7 potlatches in all, and 5 of them were all from the Kwagyuth area. So it's been really nice to see the way their cultures run. I have a lot of strong connections. That one of the items they gave me was a gift from one of the potlatches. It was a real honor in the Kwakwaka'wakw culture to receive that. And working in the West Coast, they gave me an Indian name from the West Coast when I was doing workout with them. My Indian name is Hashitsadev, which means good news in their language out there. So it was kind of neat to see a connection to their community. Yeah. So. And now when I look a little bit at our genealogy, the connection I have to the community here, to Greg Sam, his brother and I have worked alongside each other for many years when I was at Songhees here. And I had one of the ceremonies I was working at, and I had put a picture up of my grandfather and his brothers and sisters. And Greg's brother came to me and asked if he could have a copy of one of the photos of one of the elders in there. And I asked if he was related, and he said, that's my grandfather. And I said, that's a brother to my grandfather. So I instantly found a family of connections here. So I was honored to give that to his family, to show the connections to that. And also, what I have here is I brought a picture of Greg's mum, because she comes from Nanaimo. And having his mum come from Nanaimo, it makes his mum and my mum first cousins. And to see a picture of Greg's mum, who I had unfortunately never had a chance to meet, but when I seen her picture, she could be a sister to my mom. They look so similar. And just seeing what kind of papers I got here, I got lots of pictures. But nonetheless, it's just such an honor to find those connections. When like that, you can see definitely a similarity to that. So let me take a moment here and find my papers. I was going through them this morning, and we flipped some of them around, so I may have put it in another location here. Yeah. You want to see your mom's picture? Just a second, I got to get it. Yes, that's what happened. It is right here, right handy for you. And then this one would be your dad's grandmother. Your dad's.
No, that's his mother.
Yes, your dad's mother. Yes, because of the connections on what I did in Saanich. So. But neat to see this part. I'll just show, and then I'll show you the picture of my mom, see?
Oh, okay.
Yes. So I have a picture of my mom and my dad here, and then Greg's mom here isn't as sharp of an image, but you can definitely see a very similar look to their ancestry, because their fathers are brothers. And we often see our cousins, first cousins, have a similar look to them. Can you see a similarity? Yes, yeah. Mm-hmm.
Are you going to show these?
Yeah, I'll share this around a little bit. I'll share a little bit of the history on this. Is where we fit in. Now, Greg's grandfather here And then my grandfather here, which is our connection, and my great-grandparents, or our great-grandparents. I'm also related to Bill White through many family connections, also from Nanaimo too. So that's really neat of always finding these old photos. And this one photo has, one page here has brought together so many community members, because two of the siblings had children from different communities, and they had 17 children. The daughter had 17 children from each one. So there's some huge connections to our community. In the Coast Salish culture, a lot of our traditions are carried through the ladies' line, passed down through the ladies' line. So when I say that this is my mom's ancestry, that's what they wanted. Said, you got to follow that. You've got to track all that information. Yeah. So she can share it a little bit, show it a little bit around. And on the back is Greg's mom and his dad's mother. So it's mom and his grandmother. Yeah. So. When I was sharing with my mom's history from Nanaimo in 2000, I was visiting a friend in Victoria here, and he had a map on the wall, and it was a National Geographic map. And on that map was the pictures of the tribes of North America. I don't know if anyone have ever heard of that, or map of North America, North American Indians. But on that map, he had a picture of one of the ladies. And as I looked closer, I found out this is my great-grandmother. This is my grandmother's mother. And the original photo we had, and they had drawn a picture from that and put it on this map. And so I thought, wow, how did this happen? But again, of course, the National Archives has so many photos and stuff, and they get those around. But that was real honor. So my grandmother's name was Satasi, and her mother's name was Quequetsalt from Penelakut Island. And when I go over to the village, the people know me as a descendant of Quequetsalt. And of her mother was Swanemia. The name Swanemia is very well known in the Coast Salish and a lot of over in the Squamish area, but that's the descendant I come from. And having that knowledge and bringing that to their community, they said, you're a family member. You're related to every one of us here. And that's really neat. So that's where I'm enjoying my work even more now, working with the young generations and whatnot. So I thought I'd take a break here. Has anyone got questions or anything they want to ask, or am I going too fast, jumping around too much, or any thoughts?
You talk about the treaty. Maybe just a little bit more detail on what that is about.
Okay.
In terms of, when you were talking about how the people are tied to the land.
Okay.
You just mentioned the Tamil Treaty Society.
Yes.
Maybe a little bit about that.
Okay, good. Yes. Yeah. Okay. The Tomok Treaty Association. Tomok is our land. That's what our ground that we come from. The Treaty Association consists of 5 reserves: the Songhees, Beecher Bay, Sook, Malahat, and the Noose. As far as I'm still knowledge of that, yeah, it's still the 5 reserves, and having connections because they all come from the Douglas Treaty signatures of 1850. There was a treaty signed with the reserves, and those are connections to those 5 reserves. So of those 3 of the reserves, I helped set up an archives and did a lot of work with the other 2 reserves, but it didn't come to a completion before, with them and whatnot. So, any other thoughts or questions? Or yeah, because it's when I look at our ancestors, we can often see a similarity to our look as anyone, whether we're looking at photos. And I have a picture of my grandparents that I always carry around, and I found a picture of my grandfather when he was very young. A young photo of him, but an older picture with my grandmother. She passed away when I was only 4 years old, so I never got to know her. But I knew more my grandmother on my father's side, which is English ancestry. And that's kind of why I was raised basically with an English ancestry, because of the influence from that background. My father, again, being quite a bit older than my mother, he was 16 years older. And he passed away 6 years ago, and he was 90 years old. So he was already 45 years old when I was born. So came from an old generation, born 1916. There's a long old history that he came from. And again, it was his grandfather that came from England. And I tracked it and went back to England along with my chip. I went to Holland and spent lots of time traveling through Holland, but went to England to meet my family there and found the land that our family lived on. So that was really neat to find that connection. Yes, Linda.
Maybe you can elaborate a little bit more when you mentioned that our 5 bands have come up, our Douglas Treaty. I'm not sure if everyone knows what Douglas Treaty bands are.
Yeah, the bands is communities, and it's set up by the Department of Indian Affairs, which is something how been running since the 1870s, 1860s. But the Douglas Treaties were signed far before that, I think in the 1850s, early 1850s. James Douglas had come and signed treaties which he thought were the best interest to the community, but some of the treaties were a little bit lacking in a lot of detail. But there's still a connection to there. There's still some traditions that they had that they still want to keep those. We don't want to let those go, even though they weren't really detailed. It's still important to have that connection. With the bands, now we're called First Nations, but years ago they were Indian bands, of course, and then that was the community. And often they brought communities together or separated communities and gave them different First Nation. Because I remember the Beecher Bay has connections to the reserve across the straits here. And I think Souk also has connections across. So often when the places were, before the border was put in, these were communities, they knew they were family. And then the border, of course, separated all that. So I'm hoping that might be a little bit clearer. That I'm still not quite sure on how else to describe the Douglas Treaty information, because I didn't do as much research in that as I maybe could have done within it. But working as a genealogist and a photographer, I'm more focused on trying to gather the stories for the community. So
I think the one thing to mention is that it's really strong on hunting and fishing. So it states very clearly as formerly. So many of our governments would rather us just get rid of the Douglas Treaty and be totally without it. But our bands are not willing to give up that treaty, because those few lines must be very powerful, else they wouldn't be asking us to get rid of it. Or that's my take on it. Mainly. So it's just a few lines. It's not like pages and pages. So, but it's very powerful.
wonderful. Thank you
We
so
can't
much.
let it go.
Yes, so true. So that's what I was sharing that. It isn't one really clear details, but those words are very important, what was said. And I thank you for sharing and I'll elaborate on that because it gives a little bit of an idea of it, the background of it too. So, yes, anyone else have further questions, ideas, thoughts? Yes?
Where are you finding these photos from?
Most all the work comes from the community, within the community members, to sit with the eldest of the community members. Often one of my questions is, do you have any photos or knowledge of your ancestors? And many times we've got photos right on the wall, so I ask if I can reproduce those. And often I just take a picture right on the spot with my cameras. And it's been really nice to do that. So I remember one of the elders one time, I arrived at her home with a recorder because I wanted to record her history. And she looked at me and she said, "Nephew, you're supposed to remember all this stuff." And of course, we come from an oral tradition. That was the proper way. So I said to her, "But this afternoon I have 2 more elders to interview after I'm done here." And then she said, "Well, you better turn that on then." Make sure we get it straight. So we quickly turned around. And so I use that story a lot of times when I'm sharing with other communities, that if we don't record it, I might forget something or I might not have knowledge of that. And the example was of the treaties here. I don't have as much knowledge because we're not working so much with that. But within the treaty, there's so much that still has to be progressed in BC. And it's interesting. It's a whole another area of study. But the genealogy has been such an honor to find the old photos and connect them up, because often when people see their ancestors, it brings a life to it. It gives some life to who they are and where they come from, and also pride in who we are and where we come from too. Any other questions?
Apart from the family stories and the photography, how important is, for example, the language?
Yes, that's a whole nother area of the language. Some of the language I learned through traveling to the communities, working with Greg's brother. I had many times sat in when he was calling the names, so I learned some of that and sitting in the communities. It is very, very important. Some of the communities have lost their language because the eldest of the community members have passed without the recording. So it is very important. I was sharing with earlier that it was an organization, there is one organization called First Voices, and what their job is to record all the languages of the communities and put it on the internet. And so that's another way people can access it too. So. Yeah, but it is very important. So I'm real honored of all the words I am capturing and learning. And when I learned the name of what this place was here, I went specific yesterday to make sure I get the proper pronunciation of that word, just so that I could speak that in proper and in honor, because the late chief that was named from here, his mother was a sister to my grandmother. So that was an important, integral part too, to have that connection. Okay, thanks. Does that give a little bit of idea? Okay. Anyone else have any thoughts, questions?
Maybe they might wonder why we lost our language, and a lot of that had to do with the shaming from the residential school, because I went to an elders conference at one time, and the elder apologized, especially to my generation, because we were the ones most influenced by not carrying on the language. They had didn't want us to feel the shame, so we weren't the language was lost a lot at my generation because of that.
So true. And that's why it's so important with the photos and the history to record down as much as we can, because my ancestors have all passed on. My mom does have one sister still left in California. She had 8 children, but she adopted out all her children. And so they all have completely different last names and different cultural, different teachings, but they are starting now to come back. I just, at the end of this month, I have some cousins coming up from Colorado, and they want to come back and walk on the land and get a feel for the land, because my one cousin's retiring in September, and he wants to move home. He said this is his home. He wants to come home. And so that's important. There's still that attachment. My aunt is 90 years old, and she wants to come home before she passes. She wants to come and see the land again, too. And so that's neat to have that connection to it. This is where they were raised and where their ancestors, my great-grandfather and all of his ancestors were raised on that land. And so it's a really strong connection to that. So really important. So a couple, like when I was sharing earlier, that some of the families have I'll just share them from here, it's easier to have the many children in the communities, having 17 children. Each of the children are all grandparents now. So I've got many cousins that are great-grandmothers. And one of my cousins in Victoria here, she had 9 kids in 9 years. And when you think of raising that many, that's a big, big task. But now many of her kids are grandparents. And so you can see the generations growing. So even though I don't have any direct descendants myself, but I've got cousins that have got dozens of kids, it seems like it, and it just extends out so far. So the work that I'm tracing, the history that I'm putting on a piece of paper, it's going to go for generations. It's going to go for future generations that aren't born yet, that something will be put in place for them. One of the other important photos I found is on the back of the other one. I didn't share that part. This is a photograph done in late 1895 or 1890s in Nanaimo, and it's the reserve along the waterfront. And I'd heard that my great-grandfather owned 5 longhouses along the waterfront. Now, wow, try and grasp that. It's hard for nowadays for me to even think about owning more than one house, but to own 5 is interesting, because my other great-grandfather, like when it comes from the Kwakwaka'wakw, when he had his naming potlatch in Nanaimo, it went on for 1 month. And this was time before they had running water and electricity, but he held his potlatch for 1 month. And one of the songs he sang at his potlatch lasted for 6 days. And it's just so amazing to hear that 100 years ago, this is what they were doing in the area here. And so those stories have all been documented down and have all been passed down to the grandchildren. And I continue to go to the Quaggas territory. I'm doing a wedding in Fort Rupert at the end of beginning of June. And it's going to be a double wedding, but they're all connections to my family. And that again will reconnect that family up and show the connection that I'm still doing work for our family up there. So, any other comments, questions?
I'm not sure if it's appropriate. Are we allowed to talk about potlatch to maybe give a little bit of background about what that means?
Yes.
Okay.
Okay.
Could you explain potlatch a little bit for
Okay, yes.
people who might not know what that is?
Yes, okay. Okay, so a potlatch from the Coast Salish area, when my great-grandfather had one, it was a Quaggas-style potlatch, but it was in the Coast Salish area. And I don't know if anyone knows, on Vancouver Island, it's a very unique territory because the west is the Nuu-chah-nulth people, and then from the center of the island north is the Kwakwaka'wakw people, and the kind of southeast, center island southeast is all the Coast Salish area. And my great-grandfather came from the north and was given to Nanaimo in exchange for peace between the Quaggas and the Coast Salish, was the documentation he had. So we had one photo of him that was done, and I made a calendar from it at the Songhees here, but just to show the history that he came from being the eldest child and given to another nation, because his ancestry also came from the Coast Salish. And one of my uncles was sharing, it was in the 1700s that his ancestry came back. But being an oral tradition, there is no writings of that anywhere down. But it was neat that he had come there and held his potlatch to give him the name. He had the name of Lacuse, or Lagus was the name that they had in the north, in the Coast Salish version of it, Lacuse. One of them said it was one of the highest mountains that no one could reach, was an interpretation of it. But it was kind of interesting to hear that part of it. And to have this potlatch within the community, to bring family members from other communities and honor those that come to travel and hear the songs and learn the dances that they had. For him to have this for a whole month, it's just a huge amount to try and grasp, and I still haven't really realized the depths of how big that is. But to have my own naming in 2005, I invited my family from Victoria area, because I was still living in Victoria, but also put it out to all the Nanaimo area, and had a couple hundred people show up, and I was really honored that I would carry my great-grandfather's name, and with all the traditions we have with it. Of course, there's no photographs allowed in our ceremonies, but I was able to capture photographs of a lot of the people who attended. And I had some work that I had done with the military in Victoria, so a lot of the military people came and attended, and we had people questioning, is Dave in the military or something? Because they couldn't understand why they were all there in their full gear and everything. But it's a real honor to have those people as be part of mine. So now I carry that name of Lachea. So when I'm in a traditional gathering like this, I'm introducing myself as Lachea. They know I come from Snuneymuxw. That's where Lachea resided. And his ancestors have always resided in Snuneymuxw. And Snuneymuxw in itself has such a deep history of where the First Nations have resided in that area. There's several village sites in the Nanaimo area prior to the sites that we're on now. But it's neat to be part of that, and I'm still learning. I'm on a learning curve for the rest of my life in learning this, because often while I'm doing this, and I make sure now I turn off my phone, because we could be talking about the history and the language, and then next thing our phone is ringing, or there's some text messages coming in, and it just brings right back. So still, to respect that culture, is Boer has to turn off our phones so we don't have those interruptions that can easily interrupt us. So I hope that tells a little bit about the potlatching and just my experience in it. So, yes.
I think it's a new word for the Coast Salish though, we've never really used potlatch. That's more quadyo in my.
Yes, good to know that.
Well, Jose, that's true. Yeah, you
Yeah.
potlatch up there, and then we got our dances down here in southern Vancouver Island. Stem on the day, didn't it? We'll hop you read in the Chuck Island. Sting at you. Smeekla?
Smika, Sjoen.
Smeekla, Sjoen. Hey, Smeekla, Sjoen.
Nice, nice. Yeah, it's good to have that knowledge of that there. Yeah. And, yeah.
Yeah, you're covering Vancouver Island, I
Yes.
understand. Is there any other people you know who are covering other areas?
Oh, many, yes. There are many of them working in different areas, but mine working for the community is what I feel is important. We have many photographers in Nanaimo, but they're only working for their family many times, documenting for their own family.
So is there funding committed?
Sorry?
Funding?
Yes, it varies. There are some places where there's no problem with funding at all, but other ones we seem to be forever trying to find funding. And it is difficult with the government way they've set it up. Often we have to search really hard to get the funding. But if we can secure it and do some recording while their elders are here, then we have something. And often there isn't enough funding to ever finish a project to completion, but it's an honor when we can do that, when we do get enough funding for that. So that's why I work with so many different locations, like coming here and whatnot, because there isn't one specific spot. And many of us First Nations, we work in so many different locations to make an appearance at a gathering or to be involved in a gathering. It's only one of many places we might travel in 1 week. So. And I think that's something that I've seen many places in the First Nations where we seem to be traveling lots of travel. Yeah, so. Okay.
Respect is very central, I think, in a presentation like this. And we came from Europe to visit the area here around in British Columbia, and we will also visit the Museum of BC, and I was wondering, do you think the way the First Nations are portrayed in a museum like that, is it respectful, or is it half respectful, or maybe it's a difficult question.
Yeah, because I don't want to become political, but I had heard, some of my experience, I went over to Germany and I documented some artifacts from Germany, and unfortunately some of the artifacts weren't respected the way we would respect them. But a good thing is at least it's still here, because when Franz Boas came over to Vancouver Island in the 1880s, he came and documented Snuneymuxw and gathered items from Snuneymuxw. And in his words, he said it's a race of people that are dying off, and if he doesn't gather something now, there will be no record that they ever existed. And I thought, wow, what a strong words this man used. But obviously it didn't work. We existed and we are doing quite well now. But that having those artifacts, I was the first one from our reserve in 1999 when I was over there to go and document those artifacts. We had 18 items labeled Nanaimo, but unfortunately had no photographs. So when I contacted the museum and said, I'm a photographer and I would like to come, he almost brushed me off right on the phone. But hold on here, I'm calling you from Western Canada. Like, I was just really firm that I need to have that time to come in and look at those artifacts so I could record them for our First Nation. And he had given in and we have made arrangements, and it turned out to be a wonderful gathering. One of the very first artifacts I seen on one of the cart that they brought out was a Swichwe mask that came from my great-grandfather. And I thought, what, this is my family. And it was a real interesting connection to that, because we've been doing the research here and knew that one of them had gone to Europe, and here it was sitting in the museum to be recorded and brought back home. So with the photographs, even if I don't have an original photograph, I've got a copy of it. And that's what a lot of this is I have a copy of it to show that it existed out there. So that's kind of important for me as a photographer. There's a whole nother depth of things when you start taking things back or repatriating, which I don't have as much knowledge in that as at all. But to repatriate photographs, I love doing that. Love to document items. And does that give you a bit of an idea of it? Good, good. Anyone else? Any thoughts, questions? Yeah, because it is, like we're saying, a lifelong journey, and I'm still learning, even right here, with having Linda being someone that's knowledgeable of the treaties, work very closely within that for her nation too, and with Bert and Levina to work in their nations with this. It's an honor to be a part of this group, because I've have sat with each of them very close and documented history, and the wonderful times I had with Linda's mom, sitting talking and documenting her history and whatnot. It's been really neat to show our family connection with my photographs and whatnot. So, yeah. Yes, yes, she remembered me. Yeah, that's what. And it was actually her sister was the one that was telling me I was supposed to remember everything instead of recording. Yeah, but that was important. So everyone knows what the genealogy charts and stuff looks like, right? I have an idea of it, because I didn't want to pull out too much charts so much, but it's more just trying to tell the history of what it does. Because when I show a picture can say 1,000 words. And when I have a picture of my great-grandfather Lachea, that the name, that's the cover for the book, and that's become, wherever I go, I've got his picture up. That's my direction of who I am, because it comes from our ancestors. And I may have 1,000 years of English history, and prior to England it comes from Budapest, Hungary. My last name was Buda, I found out originally, prior to the 10th century. But I'm at home now here with Lachea, with Snuneymuxw, and an honor to come to the community here again after 13 years of living in the Songhees area and walking these lands on this here, getting the permission to walk through the lands. It's a real honor for me to be part of that. So I'm hoping I've given up a bit of knowledge, and she was saying I'm going to share everything, but I could go for hours of sharing because I've got so much too. But
question. I'd really like if you could talk about how a name is given. I don't, or why, or how it's different than how we would just name our kids in a non-First Nations family. Like, the names are very important, and they connect you to other families, I believe, right?
To the village. Yeah. The name Lachea connects me to Snuneymuxw. Because I am Snuneymuxw, I carry the name, and I interact with a lot of other families from other communities too, and it's someone that's doing work and doing traditional work in our communities, and doing work in a good way, and honoring the families, honoring the people who are from the other communities, and leaving a legacy for the future generations. Having a potlatch, someone said to one time, the words was to make our name good. The people who are there to witness it, witness us receiving that name, but it's to carry that name forward. Because when I get older and my ancestors and the other ones that carry that name are gone, it may be my responsibility to pass that name down to the future generations, because I'm only carrying it for my lifetime. And that's part of it, just to show where we come from and who we are. And having knowledge from our communities is so important in that naming process.
So that name would be how old?
Well, since before we ever had written, it was an oral tradition passed down. Yeah. Yeah, it could be as far. I don't like to put a date on it, but we just say since time memorial. We don't have an exact date, but we know where we come from and what name we carry. And some of them have more in-depth meanings to them. But I'm just honored to carry this man's name. And this man had 5 longhouses. Not that I want longhouses, but it's just that he had that sort of a reputation. Levina.
Yeah, there's a really big ceremony for names being handed down. And there are witnesses. And there are a lot of preparation for it, and you have to consult with your elders to know that it's right that you're doing this. And long time ago I heard that if you didn't, the person that ever got that name dishonored that name, it can be taken away from them. Because when you get your Indian name, you have to honor it, and you have to travel in a right manner through your life to honor the name that you're carrying. And it's also to show where you come from and who your relatives are.
Thank you. That group goes clarification.
Yeah, just a little more about the names. You know, my name was handed down to me by my grandmother and my mother's side of the family. The name was originally from the Tsawwassen people, where my grandmother was from. So that shows a connection of where I'm from too. Although I'm registered as Chanoch, from the Chanoch people. My name is from the Tsawwassen people, where my grandmother was from, my mom's side of the family. That's just a little bit of how it was explained to me, you know, like we have to honor that name. They honor us by giving us that name. And we have to honor that name for the rest of our lives. Make sure we live properly in our lives to do what's right, not only for ourselves, but for everybody around us. That name says on this program here. It's a lot of looking after each other, taking care of each other. That's what we're taught as young men, and so that's just a little bit of knowledge I could pass from where my name came from. Tsawwassen people. That's just we're the ferry docks in the mainland there.
Thank you. That's so true. If they expand further.
It's really important what Levine is mentioning as well, because even though we have maybe a connection in our families in some way, there's some names that Levine and I can share, but I can't share with Bert because that's an in-law to me. So it's really important when you decide upon a name, if you can actually hold that name. You can't hold that name unless you have a direct connection to it and can prove it. So my name is Shieshtido, but my father was Nuchanoth, so that's originally from Nuchanoth. And so I share it from our Nuchanoth side. And apparently there's a Shieshtido in Niabase, so that shows how we can connect. If I hear somebody with that name, I'm going to know we're related somehow, right? And my sisters will have names that come from Songhees because that's where my mother was from.
Thank you. That's so true. Yes. Yeah. Greg. Okay. She gave. Yeah. Sorry, I didn't expound on that as much because it's such an honor to even be in the area where they've got knowledge. I don't. I work as much in the genealogy as I can and connecting the families, but knowing where their traditional names come from is so important, and it's such a huge undertaking, a process. I planned for mine for 4 years before I was able to have my ceremony in Nanaimo, and so it's many times it is years longer than that too. So, yeah. So, anyone else have any thoughts, questions?
You know, when people ask, so what does that mean? It doesn't have like a meaning like some things are translated. Shieshtido is a name. It doesn't. But like you mentioned, it represents how you carry your name. You always have to respect that. At least mine doesn't have a translated name. Many of ours don't, and so I always find it interesting when people say, so what does that mean?
Yeah,
It doesn't have an actual meaning. It's a name that comes from, tells where, like you're saying, where I'm from, who my family is.
Yeah.
It's a name that comes from way back. Way back.
And
it's
as we're
been handed down century after century.
sometimes no record of when it originally comes. It's been passed down so long as being an oral tradition. It's an honor to carry that name now too, at our lifetime, during our lifetime. And like glad you're sharing with that a person a name can be taken away from a person if they don't conduct themselves accordingly. And so I'm always so cautious, nervous of that too, that I make sure when I'm sharing is something that I've studied and worked with the community members of. So days I want to bring a book forward, but I'm so nervous because of the knowledge. What if I have something wrong in it? And that's another part that I've always been cautious of. But when we're on a spiritual journey in the First Nations also, there's new things open up to us all the time. And one of the photos I wanted to share was, I took a picture 2 weeks ago now. And it was just something unique to, now where is it at? have something unique in our communities, because, oh, that seems odd when I seen it earlier. Planning and mixing things up, it's been kind of unfortunately, but it's just with that journey of seeing the spiritual things that happen along the way is what gives us guidance too, because if we don't heed to those, we'll soon fall on our face and fall in the wrong way and bring across the wrong things. So we're saying it's definitely most important to have respect for the culture and have respect for our elders. Okay, thank you. Yes, and when we were saying earlier, I had talked about the photos, but I'm seeing where I placed it. No, I didn't place it in here, and unfortunate. But when I see something of spiritual significance in our community, it's nice to record it when I can, but maybe it wasn't meant to be brought out. That's another part we learn, that if we if something isn't meant to be brought forward, some things happen and they will happen for a certain reason, not to be brought forward. And we can go stir crazy trying to make it happen, but it's not going to happen, it's not going to happen. And that's what I basically have come to accept that in that area. But just having, sharing with the spiritual thing that we're learning, we're continually learning. And that's what I always wanted to stress, that I'm not an island by myself. I'm interacting with so many family members that are here, that I have to realize that everything I share is going to connect to somebody else. All the genealogy that I share, they're showing our connections with the names, with the family photos. And I always want to be respectful, and I do apologize if I didn't share details in that, because that's so important. That I don't have knowledge in those areas, to have someone that can speak of it and to be respectful in that. When I look back, I think one of the only photos I have left here is an oldest one that I found was from England. My last name, 1604. This is a painting done of one of my ancestors. But that's about as far as I can go back on my English ancestry, the photographs, and just putting that on a photo to it gives a lot of meaning to our family connections. Someone said they can see similarities from 1600s. I don't know about that, but oh, that might be it. Yes, the collar. Yes, so true. Okay, well, I'm hoping that I've given some information. She was saying I'm going to give more, but I realize it's and in my way, it's proper for me to give a little gift also. And I brought a little gift I want to give to Greg for inviting me, because it's an honor to be at these gatherings, and I always just carry a little bit of medicine with me. So I want to give Greg a little bit of medicine, just because we always say we want to do something in a positive way. And this is what we call gachmin, and that just, yes, and just as a tradition to show that this is our medicine that we pass from our ways. Okay, but thank you. Okay, good.
Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you.
That was really beautiful to hear. Thank you for showing your images. Would you be willing to just, if anybody
Oh,
wants to peek at your images on the way out or
Yes, oh,
something
by
like
means,
that?
yeah, I'll stay longer.
Okay, and we'll definitely keep you now more in the circle on Watle. I think what I loved about your talk was how it evoked that concept again, that in almost everything we do, whether it's in our university studies, whether it's in our communities, just as staff and friends helping each other out, this idea that we're all in it together, that we're stronger when we work together, we're stronger when we know the medicine, the skills, the qualities that we bring, and when we are grateful for and noticing all of the other beautiful kinds of help that the people around us are bringing. And not just the people who are here, but the people who came before us and the people who are going to come after us. And so I thank you very much and welcome. I'm really glad you're part of this.
Okay.
Or are we going to keep you in the loop? Thank you very much. Thank you.
Just to add, like, we kind of threw Dave in here, and we tried to get him on last year. But you know, what you received is like a number of years of gathering information. So, in a sense, I guess what I'm saying is to give you an apology for what has been sort of put in your lap now. Because Dave and I guess many of us, and including our relatives from Chiano, for many years have gathered that kind of information. So there's more to what Dave is. Thank you very much, Dave, because you know it is something that is very, when you talk about respect, you know, the name that you carry, because that name tells you you belong to something. Something that you belongs to you. And he talked about, he mentioned a mask. Not everybody carries or wears a mask. You have to belong to that family. And he explained that very well. He explained it, that yes, that comes from the mother, comes from the lady that's handed down. So when you look at that Chilean, you belong to that. He belongs to that. And you see, maybe some of you have seen those paddle jackets and vests that are worn. Not all families can use that. They belong to that. And it's good to hear that, you know, when you were talking about Nikla and Smikla, you know, and the potlatches, the difference between the longhouses. And again, just to, you know, for that information might be a little bit confusing to you, but thank you very much for listening to our relative here from Snuneymuxw, Snuneymuxw, where my late mother was from, Snuneymuxw, the Nanaimo community. And the appreciation, and it's good to see some of the faculty and staff here. And thank you, Joshua. Joshua, I can't really say that far. Are you still here?
I am.
Thank you for coming down here. I'm just kidding. But anyway, and our relatives from Chiano, you heard them say Chiano, Beecher Bay community, Nishnasau from the Sioux Nation, and Laquaman. Songhees. We got a representative here from Songhees. Put your hand up there. Good. Darlene. She's working down at the University of Reception. You probably have seen her. And then we have Bill White. And that tells you that, yeah, he's tied in both to the Nanaimo and the Cowichan community. And I'm from the Sanish community. There's 4 communities out there in Eastern Sanish. And I think our relative has known that for some years now and working with Whitquamson.
Yeah.
You didn't mention his name, Whitquamson.
Yes, apologies.
My younger brother. I'm picking on him now.
Traditional name, yes.
I'm picking on him now, and that's how our people are. And he, earlier on, I gotta tell you, he asked for that, eh? He was picking on me when we were having lunch. You know, you see that? He was picking on me. And I was kind of hurt. I couldn't even eat my lunch. So I said, it's my turn. On the now, they say, on the now. Oh, look, I'm just ready to cry. And then all you people, young people came in and lifted me up. They said, there's our visitors. So I was trying to shake hands to all of you, say hello to you. And thank you, but thank you very much, Catherine and Joshua and Virginia, for allowing these young people to come in. And they talked about, someone had mentioned soccer. How many of you play soccer? Okay. think there's a challenge in order here. Yeah, we played soccer. But anyway, a real big thank you to you all for coming to listen to our relative and talk about genealogy. And much was given to you, and little was understood. Well, maybe I think you do. You understand history. You understand knowledge, the determination of families. You know, the terminology of families. You know, in the interest of looking at. You know, he didn't mention songs, but there's a lot of singing and drumming, songs that we belong to, songs that we carry. And I think Dave had very little time. Like I say, I'm kind of standing up for him now because we dragged him down here and we threw him up here. And
We'll get him back.
Yeah, Virginia really doing a good job with Watle. My relative from Himala, he talked about Watle. You heard that, eh? You heard that word, Watle? Did you hear that word, Watle?
Yes.
Yes. I couldn't hear you. Did you hear Watle?
Yes.
And you know that what it means, that it's everybody coming together to help one another. You knew that? You knew that? No?
Yeah.
Yes. It's Watle. Everyone coming together to help one another. And you've seen that and how our families do that with the names, with the family tree, with the longhouses. And there's many more things. With we call the big house. Right now we're getting prepared for the war canoe races. I think that was mentioned earlier. So just to let you know, we have war canoe races here. And I think in the summertime where the young men and young women go out and they race, they compete in the war canoe. And the 11-man, 6-man, doubles, 2-man, and a single. So there's much more that's involved with Watle, with the names and how you tie to the names within the communities. Yeah, we talk about Cowichan right down to Coast Salish, right down to Songhees and the Esquimalt. And it was good to hear you mention how Lakongan is tied into Teetamista. And that name of the lagoon again, once more?
Yeah. He's got it written, still Queemot?
Still Queemot.
Queemot,
Still
yes.
Queemot.
He's got it written down over here for you.
Still Queemot.
Yes.
Remember that. That's good history. He gave us an education this morning. And that's how it's done. So thank you very much, Lachia.
Yes.
Lachia.
Yes.
Nishan Lachia. Nishan is Nanaimo.
Snuneymuxw, yes.
Aichka.
See.
Canoe races in Slahal.
Oh, canoe races. And right now, for something that's happening, I don't know how long you're going to be here. How long are you going to be here, Cap?
They leave the day after tomorrow.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. We'll have to find out where they're at. Because my relative from.
Are you racing your canoe down to Seattle?
What? Tribal journeys? Listen to some history on tribal journeys. That's another part where it's a real big effort to work together. Thank you. And we talk about Seattle. They paddled out there, that tribal journeys. So when you look at that, there's more to, like the names. You're all tied into the communities. You're all tied to names. These are the Chilengan. I say the Chilengan. That's something we belong to. It belongs to us. And my relative was just talking about the canoe races in the Slahel. That's why I was asking how long they're going to be here. We might be able to sit with you for an hour or so and play a traditional game with you. So I guess we're asking permission, and if there's time, we might be able to do that. And that requires fun and laughter, understanding, intuition, skill and memory, a skill and demonstration that you're a good sport. You are. You all are. Yes. Yeah, he's over there. He says yes. The reading body language.
Good poker face.
Good poker face.
Yeah.
When you look at the fun and laughter in terms of what we're just adding to what our relative was providing with the genealogy and the names, and to look at the sport. I want to thank my relatives from Janak and for adding to what Dave was talking about. I think you appreciate that too.
Oh,
you know, that's working
means,
together, eh?
so
That's
good.
Watle.
Watle.
Yeah. So they come, and I really want to thank you for making your way down here. I know there's a name that was given to me, a pet name from my relatives. Big debate. I think they're the ones that earned that name.
Awa.
Awa. He said no. He doesn't want me to explain that. The history of those names. So you can see, with that regard, I guess the fun and laughter that's included in the things that we do. When we had lunch, we had a lot of fun. And I got to tell you, it was really a pleasant surprise to see you all come into the cafeteria and said, there's our visitors. So I was watching, I was counting, right, to see if there was 40. Is there 40? No. 41. And then Virginia says to me, she says, we'll share this food. I said, okay, good. But I was so busy watching all the goings on and trying to listen to what was happening next door and visiting with my relatives here and working with Dave. I said, okay, I'm going to have some of that fish. There was no more. I'm teasing you. I wasn't feeling very well. I was not feeling very well, and I just didn't have any room to have anything to eat.
But I'll never live that story down.
No, we'll fix that story up more. What brings the idea that we talked about, he told a little story, and now you know that some of our teachings come from stories. The stories that are told, in terms like you were talking about years ago, and how they're recorded, the names of the fun and laughter in terms of what we talked about. Not only the big houses that we use, the canoe races, the bone games, the traditional games, the fishing and hunting. You talked about fishing and hunting, and the stories that come along with fishing and hunting. How many of you fish? How many of you hunt? What do you hunt?
Birds.
Birds?
Watle.
Mm-hmm. So yeah. So when you look at that, there's commonalities with a lot of people. So I really appreciate the idea of what you're talking about with respect. I think our people have always had that. We've always had that and working together, and that's why we're still here. When you talk about the language, thank you for asking about the language. Yes, there's a very strong effort to hang on to the Squaw, the Indian language. Right? As we have here, Nanaimo, Snuneymuxw, Nanaimo, Nanaimo, there's a difference in that language. I don't think that was explained. There's a little difference between, there's a big difference between Nanaimo and Salish, and of course Cowichan and Salish. And then Nunchanook, West Coast, is very different. So when you look at the dialect, it varies here in BC, in British Columbia.
Yeah, my mom and dad couldn't speak their language to each other because it's very, very different.
It's very, yes.
Nunchanook and
Halkomenum. And it's a lot of fun. And there's a lot of stories in terms of learning the language. We have a lot of fun. We mispronounce and pronounce the words and things like that. So it's a lot of fun. How many, you all speak your language, right?
Don't you have 3 languages?
Officially, we have 2 languages in the Netherlands.
What are they called?
Dutch and Frisian.
Frisian? Frisian.
I don't speak that.
I do.
You do?
Yep.
You do? Say something for it. Say good day for me.
You want to hear good day, but it's too similar to the Dutch, so I would rather say something else.
Thank you. Thank you.
Dankjewel. Dankjewel.
Dankjewel.
That's
Dankjewel. Good.
So like a donkey, but not like...
Same difference. So when you see, let's talk about that and what just happened here. The fun and laughter is included in the language. I think, we talk about the language, we're very proud because my relative, Lavina, she teaches Sinchata. And Halkomenum, both languages. And of course, Kamkimula listens to Sinchata and Halkomenum. And the language from across there? Stayam. The American side. So when you look at that, there's a big tide with intermarriages. And right now we have a lot of intermarriages, and I think you have them in your country. We have the Hualmach and the Khonitan now, huh? The non-native. and the marriages and things. But anyway, you know, to hang on to that, thank you very much, and we really appreciate your attendance and your Marianne, thank you for coming down here. Hi, Scott. For showing an interest to come and spend this short time with us. But most of all, Dave, for coming down. We had to twist his arm.
Well, not very hard.
No.
Rubber arm, that's easy.
But anyway, with that, again, I guess what I really am doing is apologizing to Dave and to you, because we worked very hard, and Virginia has worked very hard at putting this project together, and with the support of Bill. Bill is a big part of support in terms of translation and different things. So with that, we have some of the elders that are not here. So, and Darlene, thank you for making your way up here today. Darlene Joseph from Laquanan.
She had a comment here.
Oh, yes.
Chris and Sid are the faculty members from the University of Groningen, and I think they want to say thank you to you. Is that okay?
Absolutely. There's a thank you in order here.
Yeah, we came to Canada from Europe. We came to BC, to Vancouver Island, to Victoria, and I think this visit this afternoon adds a lot to our visit so far. A couple of times we had meetings about planning, about economic development, and sometimes First Nations were mentioned, but it was never like this, because this is really the first time we visited First Nations, and we heard stories about respect, about the language, about the family ties, and I think it was very, very interesting to be in this room last 2 hours. So I would like to thank you for the opportunity. Thank you. Thank you.
And there's donkey.
Thank you, that's it, indeed, yeah. You're going to be in a very special position as you learn Frisian before you learn Dutch. So that'll be very interesting when once you come over. Indeed, as Chris said, very interesting to be here. You already said, I'm not sure whether you understood everything. I'm pretty sure we didn't, but still, there's a few lessons we really learned today. I think one of them is really the connection you have to the land, where you're from, so your place, and even how that is kind of translated in the names that you have and that you give to the people to your people, in that sense. So that has been a great lesson to us. And it's been a real honor to sit down with all of you at the same table and meet, and as you said, fun and laughter, talk about these issues. So, well, with the gifts, many thanks for setting this up. And we have a small book for the speaker, for Dave. And we are very proud of where we're from as well. We are a bit of a special place in the Netherlands, we like to think, anyway. And maybe that was a bit of the background to this book that gives some sort of introduction in a geographic way. So we don't have pictures, but we do have maps, because that is what we use in geography, that explain a little bit where we're from. So thank you for giving that insight, and we want to give you back this. Thank you very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Nice.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
I want to pour my Frisian.
I would like to thank everyone who gave even more information to us. Thank you.
Thank you. Bill, you want to do one more song, don't you? Yes. Bill wants to give you, we'd like to do a send-off. Like a send-off. I want to do one more song. Give you like a little protection for your journey home.
Well,
your journey to Seattle, and your journey to where you're staying tonight. So just a little protection, a little feeling of medicine. A medicine.
He's going to stand on this quick.
No, okay, you come and stand with us. I just want to thank you again, all, and Bill. I call him, you know, Bill White. I call him Wild Bill. You can call him that. Because he likes to be a little bit of a bully with me because he's bigger than me, right? And you can see I'm very sensitive, eh? So we want to sing this song. It's called a paddle song. A paddle song. Paddle song protect you on your journey, protect you in your work. Or like, you know, for our people, like when you talk about the harvesting, like when you went out fishing, you prepare the islands and the water so you can get a big catch to bring back to your communities. How many of you fish again? Oh, good for you. There you go. Like these are the people we depend on. You go on fishing and bring it back to the community. So just to look at that, not only a song of protection medicine, but it's also to give you a good open mind and a good feeling in terms of what Bill's going to tell me now.
Because Greg is so shy, you saw that. I have to whisper to him. Just say.
Oh, okay. Okay, good.
He's going to sing a verse first, and then you guys will follow this again. Then you'll follow, then you just the second. All right?
Joe, it was say. What did he tell me to do? No, you know, when you look at what just happened, like it's a paddle song, it's a protection song, but it's been added with the strength of these young people standing with us. You know, and I'm pretty sure some of our relatives sang with us. You know, and it's I guess it's a little bit difficult to do some of those kind of things, to even speak, you know, to a bigger audience, so let alone singing. So we really appreciate these young men that stand with us and give us that energy and strength to give back to you, to protect you, to give you a good feeling. What we call a good feeling that everything's going to work. The communication, the dialogue, the conversation. Your trip to Seattle. Now I think you're going to enjoy that. We know that. You're going to enjoy that trip. But we're just adding a little bit of a better feeling, a little bit more of a positive outlook in terms of where you've been, where you're going, and your return back to home. With a little bit of information, a little bit of history on the First Nations people. Snuneymuxw First Nations people, as we call it. And it would have been nice to get some of your names, but I don't think that's possible. But we might. We might be able to get them to email them to us. We'll get them to email them to us. And if there's a need to, and we have who's in charge here, we'll leave that with you. That's great. That's me.
Thank you.
So thank you very, Virginia, was there anything you want to add, Virginia McKendry?
No, just to thank everybody very much for joining us today, to know that we are, because of the help I'm getting from students in my BA in Professional Communication program, we're very close to formally launching the Watle blog. It actually exists, we just haven't been putting a lot of written content, like commentary in it, but we are posting stories that Bill White is sending to us. We're trying to create a hub in the internet universe for people who want to have good, strong relationships between Indigenous and newcomer settler people, and especially to focus on learning more about, we're starting with solid knowledge about Coast Salish culture and people, but we want to be a place where people can meet across cultures, raise their awareness, and I'll be looking for guest bloggers from all over the world. So if there's anybody here, I'm going to just I'll leave these by the door. There's a website for where we will post this presentation on Greg's Aboriginal Relations page. There's a link to the YouTube channel where these kinds of Watle presentations are housed, but also other presentations related to Royal Roads in general, so you can see lots of videos from Royal Roads. The Watle blog WordPress address is here, and my contact information and Greg's contact information are here. And you'll see his name, his traditional name is on here too, Lakhalak.
Lakhalak, that's
Yeah.
right, good for you.
I'm getting better. Okay, so I just like you very much, I'd really appreciate any comments you can write. You don't have to fill out the whole thing at all, but it'd be very helpful to Greg and I, because we're going to do a poster presentation for National Aboriginal Day here in this room. There's a partnership between the Pacific Peoples Pacific Peoples Partnership Group and Royal Roads are having a virtual poster conference held here on National Aboriginal Day, where we're going to be live streaming in people from all the way up and down the coast of the Americas who have anything to do with Indigenous peoples partnerships and alliances with universities and other groups. So, and I'd like to do one about Watle, but I need some feedback from the people who come to Watle to make this an interesting poster. Okay. And then also in our next Watle event, which will be in June, we are not going to have a formal speaker, although we would love people to come, because I would like to have a day where we talk about how we're going to do research together. And I would also like everyone who comes to see what my students in the BA program have been creating. They have a 10-minute video about Watle that they've been working on with Greg and Bill in one of their courses, and I would also like to talk just generally about how we can do collaborative research together. So that's it from me. I talk too much, don't I?
No.
Is that right on June 21st?
It's the conference, the poster conference is on the 21st, but we're going to have Watle the week before. I just want to make sure my students can be there, and they're coming back from a 3-week break. So Linda, I'll send a notice out within a week about when that date is.
Okay. I can't bear with him. But demo was on the date of later at the Mesa. You know, Slamnock made in a swallow, I can't bear it. would have to meet and I need to squallow, need to Palestine is a little, would have to meet and I need to squallow. Need to answer, so why that? Do stays, need to do squallow, Mistimo. Need to change the water, it's squallow. No hellish, but I need to squallow, need to squallow. Stimo. Need to sit up, high cap, no willing cap, need to see, you need to hike no willing cap, need to meet the swallow, need to lick it. Need to lick it, high cap, with no queen at it. Need to see you. Lucky. They don't see him can squall. Palestine is a little, you know, don't see him need to squall, need to answer. High cap, no queen at it, need to swallow. High cap, thank you very much. Thank you very much for your attendance, your good feelings, to listen to our speaker, to work together, and to look at and recognizing our elders, you know, from our community, and our relatives from the Nanaimo culture area. And of course that leadership here with Virginia and Joshua, and some of our staff with Marianne and others that are here. Well, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you once more. Haichka. Haichka.